Hello, and welcome once again to my challenge run in which I must obtain every Pokémon in National Pokédex order. This is part 6 of an ongoing series, so if this is your first one, well, just keep watching, and if you like what you see by the end, feel free to check out the rest in the playlist below. If this is your first time, I'll go over the rules, but if you've just finished binging the first 5 and you don't want to hear me drone on about the rules again, skip to the timestamp on screen now. I must obtain every single Pokémon in the order that they appear in the National Pokédex. Once I've obtained one, I am then allowed to move on and catch the next one after it. However, I am allowed to freely obtain any Pokémon as many times as I like after I've gotten it once. Going into this segment of the run, I've already obtained every Gen 1 through 5 Pokémon, which means I am free to catch any of them that appear at any point. But if, for example, a wild Bunnelby or Fletchling shows up before I've gotten all full evolved Kalos starters, I am not allowed to catch it. Alternative forms won't matter for this challenge, so as long as I get any form of a certain species, that's fine too. I can use any games that I want to, and jump between them and use games that I used at previous points in the challenge, so long as playing them won't break the main rule of obtaining Pokémon in order. It's not a living dex, so I don't need to obtain them all in one game or have them all together in one place. I can trade back and forth between these games as well. I can use any side games, peripherals, glitches, events, or anything else at all. Except actual cheating, unless I use it to give myself an event, obviously. However, I will only be using these alternative methods if there is no way at all to obtain it in a core series game without breaking the chain and catching a Pokémon out of order. If I get a Pokémon in a side game, I won't count it as obtained in the context of this challenge until it has been transferred into a mainline game or into Pokémon Home. And with the rules finally explained once again, let's hop over to Kalos. Well, one other little rule I'm putting in place just for this video. I'm not allowed to trade to make evolving Pokémon faster. This is because when I made the spreadsheet of how I would get each Pokémon, I realised that I could just trade each one to Omega Ruby, beat the league a few times and have it fully evolved. That is boring, and I am not doing that. Unlike the last video, I unfortunately have no easy way of fully evolving the starters, and therefore I started with X. Giving myself an adequate and descriptive name, it was time to begin the Kalos journey. After getting through the usual start of games snooze fest, meeting my neighbours who look way taller in the cutscene than in gameplay, I met my other infuriatingly nice rivals and chose Chespin as my starter. I battled Shauna, who for some reason chooses the Pokemon weak to the players, and then continued into the next area. Chespin of course knocked out everything I saw, and I was only allowed to catch non-Gen 6 Pokemon, at least for now. Therefore I caught some funny monkeys and a Pikachu in Santaloon Forest, beat all the trainers in the next route and entered Santaloon City. Then I beat all the trainers in the other area I had access to, along with the roller skater in front of the gym to get the roller skates. Entering the gym and completing the puzzle, involving running around on top of some spider webs, I was able to destroy all the bug type trainers easily and reach the leader Viola. It was an easy win of course, and I got the bug badge, showing that this was a generation where they ran out of badge name ideas, and then took my leave. Outside I was given the EXP share, which is incredibly overpowered in this game and all others going forward. It gives experience to all of the team, which of course makes the game itself too easy, but in terms of this challenge it's a big relief. Running around in the flowers, I just knocked out every single Pokemon I found, along with beating all the trainers, and Chespin evolved into Quilladin. Then I met the most forgettable and annoying duo of trainers ever, and then entered Lumio City, aka Miniature Paris. 1 second of walking led to me being told where to go next instead of being allowed to just explore. I did actually try to explore, but forgot about the blackout preventing most of the city from being accessible, so to the lab I went. Meeting Sycamore and beating his team of the 3 Kanto starters, I was then able to choose one of them. I chose Charmander, just because. I also got the Charizardite X, as this is the game that introduced Mega Evolution. You may notice during this playthrough that I barely ever used Mega Evolution, and you'll see why later. Then I was introduced to Not Evil Man, the Team Flare boss Lysander, did a trainer PR video for some reason. Yeah, not really sure why I did that. I met Evil Man again, along with the champion, and then after a bit of struggling with super speed, I left the city. Then I met Mr. Beast. I actually wrote Mr. Beast in my script, not Mr. Bonding. I'll just roll with it. Then I met Mr. Beast, who gives out O-powers, which I'll explain later. Then I got accosted by a couple of Lucario, was coerced into fighting Tierno and his majestic Corphish. Then I just explored the rest of this area, knocked out all the wild Pokemon I found, beat all the trainers and entered Campfire Town. and got stopped 2 steps in, which they love to do in this game. In Chabanneau Castle, I was told that they need to get their Pokéflute back, the reason for that being the fan service sleeping on this bridge. I was instructed to pick up the Pokéflute from Perfume Palace, and so heading over there, getting scammed, finding someone's furfrou, finding the HM for cut, and picking up the all-important amulet coin, I then watched some fireworks, got the Pokéflute, and headed back. Then I woke up Snorlax, but I knocked it out instead of catching it just so I could get a nice chunk of experience. Also Charmander evolved. Across the bridge, I was brought into the daycare centre to learn things I already knew, then went back into the previous route to defeat every trainer and wild Pokemon I could find. Quilladin is cool and all, but I really wanted to move the Pokédex forward. Beating 2 of my rivals in a double battle, I ran through the connecting cave and then continued just doing what I've been doing. I will also point out the stones are graciously easier to find in this game. I reached Ambrette Town and then got interrupted again. I got the TM for Rock Smash, the old rod, and talked to the scientist at the museum to progress the story forward some more. I also found Mr. Bonding at the hotel, very normal and not creepy at all. Riding the Rhyhorn through the rocky terrain, I eventually reached Glittering Cave, knocking out plenty Pokemon on the way, beat the large array of Team Flare grunts, reached the scientist, and chose the Jaw Fossil when I was offered. Then on the beach I got the dowsing machine, which went criminally underused, and reached Silage City. First thing I did here was get a bike, then talk to the gym leader Grant to get the HM for Strength. Speaking of Grant, I entered his gym, did rock climbing for a while, then beat his team and got the Cliff Badge. Heading north, I went through Route 10 and reached Geosenge Town. I had to fight the next gym leader early, I didn't even remember this happening, but regardless I won and Quilladin evolved into Chestnut. And then it was time to repeat that twice more. However, instead of deleting the file, I made a backup of the X save before starting a new game. That way Blonde Baz and his Chestnut still exist. I don't know where they exist, but they are somewhere in the ether. So now it's time for X. Again. To up the difficulty, I decided to play in French, which I was sure I wouldn't regret. Let's see... We'll go for Olivier. Then it was the same thing as before, except this time I chose Fennekin, or should I say Fennekin? I named it after one of the only words I know in French, then I rushed the beginning, and after beating Viola, it evolved into Braixen. I chose Squirtle at the lab, again chose the Jaw Fossil. Needed to look it up to make sure I was definitely choosing the right one. I beat Grant, then beat all the trainers in the next route, then after a couple more wins after that, Braixen evolved into Delphox. And then it was finally time to play Pokemon Y. Would you believe me if I said this is going to be the same thing again, but with a different starter? I chose the name Y after the character from the manga. Not the name of the game though, no. So anyway, the same thing again. Rushing through the start of the game, this time I chose Froakie, won the same battles again, reached level 16 and evolved into Frogadier. Continuing with the story, I chose Bulbasaur this time, and also decided that I would catch the Snorlax this time, just because I can. I chose the Sail Fossil this time, and then after beating Grant and all the trainers in the next area, Frogadier evolved into Greninja. And after what felt like an eternity, I was finally able to actually catch new Pokemon. I made Y my main game for this segment of the run, and so in that game I headed back for many miles since I didn't have Fly yet, reaching the closest location where I could catch the next Pokemon, Bunnelby. It was of course an easy catch, but a trend in this game is that almost none of the second stage Pokemon can be found in the wild, so a lot of grinding was needed. After getting a haircut in Lumiose City, I finally actually progressed east of Geosenge Town, and after beating all of the trainers on this route, I entered Reflection Cave. Continuing the trend of KOing everything, I ended up with a Venusaur after not too long, but more importantly, Bunnelby reached level 20 and evolved into Diggersby. I quickly left the cave to go back and catch a Fletchling and made that my new grindy Pokemon. That grind was unfortunately going to be a lot longer though. The first of its evolutions was quick though, with it evolving into Fletchinder before I reached the end of the cave. In Chaleur City, I made my way to the Tower of Mastery, got told to GTFO since I only had 2 badges, but also had to beat my rival before taking on the gym, and after beating him in a very close battle, I left and entered the gym. Which is all about roller skating. The gimmick here is that you have to beat all the trainers to unlock the grinding rail to get to the middle. And so after beating all 4 of them, it opened up and I reached Karina. And her team wasn't particularly difficult either, the overleveled Greninja made sure of that. So I got the Rumble badge, headed up to the top of the tower and faced off against Karina again. Except this time it was a Lucario v Lucario situation to learn about Mega Evolutions. After the fight was done, I got the Lucario and then also got the HM for Surf. Okay. This guy would have given me a Lapras, but my team was full, which I thought they'd fixed by Gen 6. Of course, having a Greninja meant it was irrelevant. Me too, buddy. In the next area, I was able to ride on a Skiddo, which I spent way too much time procrastinating on. Also made sure to pick up the shiny stone along with a Whip's Dream, both for later use. And leftovers as well. Reaching Coumarine City, I can't walk into a new location without being interrupted. I went into the train station and got the HM for Fly, reached the other side of the city and battled my rival once more. And won once more. Route 13 was a nightmare to traverse as always, but I did want to use it for some grinding, as Greninja was able to get plenty of easy KOs here. Heading back to the gym and doing all the fun silly little puzzles, I reached Ramos and despite my type disadvantage I beat him anyway and got the plant badge. With that badge I was able to fight the Flare Grunt on Route 13, and I picked up the pass to the power plant and was finally going to be able to end that blackout. I was then challenged to a battle by Mr. Worldwide himself, and after knocking out his Pitbull, Fletchinder finally reached level 35 and evolved into Talonflame, which was a long time coming. Then I beat Aliana and was able to start up the power. Before progressing the story further, I had to progress my own story, and so I headed back to Santaloon Forest and caught a Scatterbug. After a very short grind, I got it to evolve into Spupa and was intrigued to find out which pattern it would then evolve into. At level 12 it evolved into Vivillon, which was in its jungle pattern. That means that I am apparently living in either Malaysia, Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, Panama, Costa Rica, Singapore, Brazil, French Guyana or India. So I'll be back in a few hours. Okay, I got myself a Colombian passport and I am ready to continue the challenge. Starting with Litleo. I then was confused because the guy there said there was still a blackout, even though there was clearly not a blackout. Eventually I found out that the trigger for the story to continue was going south of Route 13 to meet this dishevelled gentleman, and that magically makes the blackout go away. Entering Lumio City from this route caused Shauna to appear, and then after that it led me to being dragged over to the non-Ivo Tower, which of course is the next gym. This gym is yet another badly thought out quiz show, as if Blaine and Fantino weren't bad enough, where the reward for getting a question right is battling less trainers, meaning less experience, and we don't want that. So I mistook the Pikachu silhouette as being Emolga and Dedenne, and continued that trend until I got all the way to the top and fought against Clement. And he was not difficult, mainly due to this whole run being Greninja flattening everything while one Pokemon gains EXP from doing nothing. Anyway, after getting the Voltage badge, I went into Lysander Cafe, and Sycamore still hadn't figured out that Team Flare's evil, then entered Route 14 to demolish my rival yet again. I headed through the next area, and I took great pleasure in knocking out every Carablast I saw. Oh yeah, so then I had to go into a haunted house, which served literally no purpose whatsoever and wasn't spooky, and I didn't tip the guy. Getting through the route, I reached Laver City and entered the very first fairy-type gym. Getting through this knockoff version of Saffron Gym, I reached Valerie, took her down and got the fairy badge. A quick stop off at the Pokeball factory was required before the next badge though, and so I once again thwarted another evil plan from Team Flare. I had not been paying any attention to the dialogue and hadn't played this since 2013, so I forgot about what their big evil plan actually was. But anyway, it was very easy and I got a Master Ball for my troubles. Next up was Route 15, which was full of leaf pile jump scares. After winning a couple more battles, I finally had progress on the Pokédex as Litleo evolved into Pyroar. I almost forgot I was commentating a Pokédex completion video. Before continuing, I first caught the next Pokemon, which was Flabébé. I then just simply kept going through Route 15 and then the Lost Hotel, KOing everything and anything that showed up. And Flabébé evolved into Floette. I then used a shiny stone on it to immediately evolve it into Florges. Next up was Dendemil God damn it. Saving that place as a fly location, I quickly headed back to Route 5 to catch Skiddo. Then I continued on. Well, after showing off some sweet moves. I headed towards the Frost Cavern with this Mamoswine refusing to budge because of something to do with Team Flare. It was needed to get through the next area and Skiddo needed experience, so it was time to get chilly. Beating every trainer and wild Pokemon here and sliding around doing ice puzzles, I reached Team Flare, beat them all up and saved an Abomasnow and got its Mega Stone. Also look at Mega Abomasnow, it's so silly. I can now traverse Route 17, and so after trudging through the snow, KOing more wild Pokemon along the way, I reached Anastar City. I gazed upon this giant pink thing which holds no actual gameplay or story purpose as far as I can tell, knocked out my rival yet again, and then was unable to go any further south due to Durant apparently tearing up the place. For now, all I could do was take on the gym, and so I did so. I genuinely forgot about this place being so weird and cool, and after battering my way through all the trainers, I reached and defeated Olympia, getting the Psychic badge. Then a broadcast from Lysander happened, but I was busy grinding my goat. That sounded like a Zoomer euphemism. Anyway, Skiddo evolved into Go-Goat. Unfortunately, there was yet another evolution in the 30s, this time Pancham, and so I caught it and got to work once more. But here's the problem I was faced with. I have 7 badges and a lot more grinds to do, but the next part of the story will involve me needing to eventually catch a legendary Pokemon, that being Xerneas in X and Yveltal in Y. So because of this, I had to do a lot of grinds to get every Pokemon before Xerneas, except I had beaten basically every trainer, and there weren't that many high-level wild Pokemon to train on. So what was the solution? The Battle Chateau. I had never actually made use of this place before, and I was a fool because of it. This place is fantastic for grinds, as you get an infinite stream of trainers that keep spawning for you to defeat. You start off with a low rank, but the more wins you get, the higher your nobility becomes, and so the levels of the Pokemon also increase. Using writs, you can increase the number of trainers who appear and their levels for faster EXP gain. And every so often you'll meet a Furisode girl who only have Audino, and when combined with the Experience O power, it gains you a ton of experience. Eventually, Pancham got to level 32, and because Greninja is a dark type, it evolved into Pangoro. Mercifully, the next one doesn't evolve, that being Furfrou, so I had some very brief respite before the next grind. Which actually wasn't as long as the others. Esper was next, and it only needs to reach level 25, and so after conquering the chateau a few more times, it evolved into Meowstic. I then did some super training for the first time, which I had literally never done in my life, as I never really cared for EV training. However, that wasn't the reason I was doing it. Instead, it was for a Dusk Stone. The only guaranteed Dusk Stone in the game is not obtainable until you've beaten the champion, and so I had to earn one here. Beating the balloons in order, I eventually unlocked the Aegislash balloon, and after blowing it up a few times, I got a Dusk Stone. And why was that needed? For the next fully evolved form, of course. I caught myself a Hone Edge, and after running through the Battle Chateau for ages, I reached level 35, evolved into Doublade, and I now used a Dust Stone on it, and evolved into Aegislash. Taking a nice little break from grinds, next up were some trade evolutions. I caught Spritzy, a Y exclusive, and then traded it to X while holding a Sachet to evolve it into Aromatisse. Please see the previous video to find out why I said traded in the way I did. Back in French-speaking X, I spoke to this guy, and presumably got a Whip Dream. Yeah, it's a Whip Dream. I then caught Swirlix, Sucroqueen, which is exclusive to X, gave it the Shanty Bonbon, and traded it to Y, evolving it into Slurpuff. Apologies to any French speakers, I'm sure this is painful to listen to. I headed back to X again to catch Inkay. The reason I'm now using X is because I have plenty of the game left to complete, and leveling here would be way more efficient than mindless grinds. After beating my rival at the Tower of Mastery, Wartortle evolved into Blastoise. This is important to note, as many people were unhappy with my decision to delete Blastoise from existence in the first video. Unfortunately, very few of them are likely to see or hear this because that video's average watch time is 9 minutes, so I have no idea how I'll pass the message on, but hopefully one day they'll forgive me. And if you did stick by me despite that decision, thank you, and I hope you do forgive my foolish decision in that video. Sounded like I was doing a YouTuber apology video there. Anyway, I then beat Karina to get the next badge, and then grinded for ages in Route 13. Eventually, Inkay reached level 30, and so I turned the system upside down, and voila, it evolved into Malamar. For anyone who's curious, if you right click and drag up on the touchscreen on an emulator, it counts as tilting it upside down. I decided to do a quick check of the skies in Hoenn, as the next Pokemon Binacle can appear in Mirage spots and evolves at level 39. Unfortunately, the Mirage spots it can appear in weren't around, and I didn't want to keep waiting multiple days, so I just got an X instead. After catching Opermine, I then beat Ramos, Clement and Valerie, beat more trainers, and it reached level 39, evolving into Barbaracle. I realised I had never picked up the Good Rod or Super Rod in either game, so I got to that next. I hadn't even bothered entering Route 16 yet, and it was a shame I got caught in this battle and was forced to kill a Crawdaunt. Regardless, I got both rods and went fishing. First was... and thanks to the Super Rod I didn't need to train it at all. I fished up Dragalge after that, and so Skrelp did need a single level up. Got a critical capture as well, which is always nice to see. I then did all that again, but in X, as these are all version exclusives. I caught Clauncher, and then right after that, caught Clawitzer. Riding around on a Rhyhorn in the rocky area, I caught myself a Helioptile, and again thankfully no levelling required as I used a Sunstone to evolve it into Heliolisk. Sadly, it was time to grind once more. I traded in my Jaw Fossil for Tyrant in X and got to work on evolving it. It only evolves during the day, which is a blessing in disguise because otherwise I would have been up all night. After beating Olympia and grinding it to Hell at Frost Cavern, I got it to level 39 and evolved into Tyrantrum. Then I did the exact same thing in Y to get Amora. I had to wait until night, but once that came along, since I had access to high level Pokemon in the Battle Chateau, it didn't take too long. I got it to level 38, used a rare candy, and evolved into Aurorus. I got sick of Kalos and went back in time. If you saw the last video, you'll know that I got an Eevee with a fairy move to max happiness, and now it was time to cash in on that happiness. I finally allowed it to evolve into Sylveon, thus bringing me to a grand total of 700 Pokemon. And now I must say, blessings be upon whoever decided that the next 3 didn't need to evolve. I caught Hawlucha, and then Dedenne, and then went to Reflection Cave to catch Carbink. The Switch provided an easy out for the pseudo-legendaries of this generation. The Goomy line all exists in Legends Arceus, and so after catching Goomy, I also caught this Alpha Sliggoo that hangs out in the Crimson Mirelands. And because it was already level 50, I entered an area with rain and evolved into Goodra. Next up, I went into the Lost Hotel to find my missing keys. There they are. Clefairy doesn't evolve, so I was still on Easy Street, and next up was Phantump. It evolves by trading, and although you can catch Wild Trevenant, it's in an area I can't reach without catching the legendary, so I traded it to X to evolve it. Then there was Pumpkaboo, another trade evolution, so I did the same to evolve it into Gourgeist. Back in Hisui for the last time in this video, I went to the Icelands in order to catch my next target, which is Bergmite. Then I headed over to Avalug's Legacy to catch the titular Avalug. I had been progressing in catching the majority of the Kalos Dex in Y, but X was the first game I was going to progress the story in. I have no idea what these characters are saying and couldn't remember what happens here, so it was a guessing game. Moving these shelves out of the way, I was able to enter the secret Team Flare base inside the cafe, beat Lysander and a bunch of the other Team Flare members, eventually reaching a prison holding that giant guy from earlier. He then monologued in French, and then I reached the final admin, and after beating him he told me to choose one of the buttons. Again though, I couldn't understand him, so I picked the wrong button and accidentally unleashed a giant doomsday weapon. Not my finest moments. I headed to Geosenge Town and entered the now open Team Flare secret HQ. Lysander was there and he talked about memes for some reason. I fought Mr. Worldwide once again, along with a bunch of other double battles, eventually reaching the basement. I beat all the other Flare members, then a cutscene played in which Xerneas was awakened. I had only heard rumours about Xerneas respawning if you knock it out, but I wanted to know for sure and tried it out myself. And so I just decided to reach this point, even though, as you can clearly see on your right, I still have a few to go before catching it. So when the battle began, I just knocked it out. And it just respawned. Great. This is another classic Game Freak tactic to ruin my challenge run once again. You are required to catch Xerneas or a Veltal. If you knock it out, it just respawns. There's literally no way around it. And how does that affect me? Because the earliest place to find Noibat is Terminus Cave, which can only be accessed after the box legendary has been caught. And having a little glance at the Pokédex, well, I can definitely tell you that that would break the rules. The only other games in which you can obtain Noibat are Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, Sword and Shield, and Scarlet and Violet. All of which, of course, cannot be played yet without breaking the rules of the challenge. I was hoping I wouldn't have to do this again, but... Welcome back to Pokemon Go, once more. Mercifully, Noibat actually was in season while I was attempting to find Carablast, so I did end up catching a bunch of them. While doing a lot of the searching and general walking, I did so with Noibat as my buddy Pokemon, so that it would passively gain candies. As I explained in the last video, Pokemon evolutions in Go are done via candy, with a Pokemon gaining one after a certain number of kilometres travelled. In the case of Noibat, it gains one candy every 5 kilometres, and it needs 400 candy to evolve. Hold on a second. 400 multiplied by 5 is 2000. 2000 kilometres. That is 1242.742 miles. That is 47.43 marathons. Oh dear, that's going to be a slow one. And upon checking, I can confirm that you cannot find wild Noivern. So it has to be evolved and there is no way around it. So I got to work, and after a few months of walking, it evolved. Okay, so obviously I didn't walk the equivalent of 47.5 marathons, that's just silly. And the video has been released and no human could physically be capable of that feat in a matter of months. Well, not me anyway, you know, I'm a gamer, not an athlete. I mean, I didn't walk across the ocean all the way to Finland. There were a few corners I was able to cut to make this grind less daunting. First of all, if you raise your buddy Pokemon's affection by feeding it berries and doing other silly things with it, it temporarily reduces the distance required to walk to gain candies. Most notably, if you feed it a Poffin, it halves the distance you need to travel. A lot of the research tasks give Poffins, and also rare candies which give you 1 Noibat candy when used on them. Using a Pineapple berry would give me 6 candies per Noibat, and I ended up catching 12 of them. Completing raids and routes and putting it into gyms also gained more candies. I also made sure to release all but 2 of them, so I had 1 spare to send to home and another to evolve into Noivern. The ones released give 1 candy per Noibat. Even though this was a pain, I did get a nice slideshow of some of my favourite moments in our adventure together. This included it hanging out on my couch, on a towel rack, watching the... let me check my notes here. BTCC Croft Round 17. Hanging out on a different couch. Wait, what? How did a smear get into the picture? Yeah, when this happened I was confused and I had no idea what was going on, never knew this was a mechanic. Anyway, I had a lot more but I couldn't post them without leaking my exact location. Not even a bush at the side of the road. I've seen how scarily accurate those geoguessers can get. But here's a fake Rayquaza I found on holiday to make up for it. Along with this, I bought one of these. It's a swing with a magnet, and if you strap a phone to it, it swings infinitely, tricking the game into thinking you're walking. And so, when I was not out and about, I had Noibat still gain candies using the pendulum. Combining these shortcuts, I was able to eventually, after a few painful months, get the 400 candy required and evolved Noibat into Noivern. And that is why this video took so long to make. It wasn't a Dark Souls video, it wasn't fatigue, it was Noibat. Well, it was mainly Noivern, but I'm blaming Noibat as well. After that, I transferred both of them into Pokemon Home, Noibat first, Noivern second. And then I was able to finally continue actually playing the real games. Alright, so now it's just the legendaries left. I actually ended up editing most of the entire video before getting Noivern. It was genuinely the longest and most tedious part of this entire challenge so far. Anyway, yeah, I caught Xerneas. Its catch rate is deliberately high, so 1 quick ball did the trick. Then Lysander came back once more with his discount Doc Ock cosplay, and despite having a Mega Gyarados, well, I'm overleveled, so it was no contest. Then he fired a beam into the air that destroyed all of Central Europe. Or apparently just this one small town with like 5 houses in it. Oh well, never mind. I saved the day, I guess. Then it was time to do all that again. I won't waste your time though. I beat everyone again, pressed the red button this time, but still unleashed a weapon, and then beat all the trainers in the basement, and this time a slightly different cutscene played, as I summoned Yveltal instead. Strangely, Yveltal is all about destruction and Xerneas' creation, so not really sure why both are going to destroy the world. I'm sure someone in the comments can clear that up for me though. In the battle, it rudely broke free from a quick ball, and I had to actually weaken it, but once the deed was done, I was able to move on and actually play more of the game. I was now finally allowed to actually enter Route 18. A bunch of Durant tearing up the place was the reason I had to walk more miles than those 2 Scottish twins sang about, rather than being able to just catch Noibat here. I actually didn't catch it here though. Instead I just headed straight to Kuraway Town, beat the Professor's new team and got the HM for Waterfall. Then I just kept pressing forward, fighting 3 of my rivals on the bridge, and after beating each of them I headed to Snowbell City. The gym was closed, so I entered the Winding Woods, catching a Trevenant here to make up for getting it in a stupid way earlier. I will get the other 3 trade evolutions properly in later games as well. I reached the Pokemon village and Wulfric was there, and I told him to go back to his gym so I could finish this part of the challenge already. I entered the gym and was taken aback by the fact that it's an Ice-type gym with no sliding puzzles. I beat Wulfric with ease because Ice types are terrible and they need to stop making their specialists so late in the game. And with 8 badges, I was able to enter Victory Road. After beating this random guy. I said the Gen 5 Victory Road cape was the coolest, but this whole animation alone makes this one take second place for me. I ran through Victory Road, beating all the trainers and also coming across my rival yet again. And he was flattened once more. I got through most of the area and happened across a silly little bat that could have saved me a lot of ankle pain if it had been available significantly earlier. Anyway, enough of that. I caught it, just because I can, and then I reached the Pokemon League, and I have to say I don't remember it being so cool. My disliking for X and Y may have been blown out of proportion because I actually had a lot of fun playing through this and did like the look of a lot of the environments. Especially the Elite Four chambers. And speaking of the Elite Four, I beat each of them with absolute ease because, you know, my team is stupidly overleveled. And by team I mean Greninja, especially against Malva's fire types. After beating Wickstrom, my Noibat actually evolved into Noivern, much easier than the way you get it in Go. I beat Drazna and Seabold, then entered the Champions Chamber. And Diantha was also very easy to beat. Every member of her team went down in one hit, including her Mega Gardevoir. I was crowned champion, and then after that there was a series first, in which our efforts of taking down the bad guys were actually publicly acknowledged. I then fought AZ, and after sweeping his team aside, that somehow caused his Eternal Flower Floette to return. And he also said the line that became meme to hell back in 2013. The player's mum didn't attend the award ceremony, shame on her. Anyway, time to get the last remaining tangible capture of this video. I made my way to Terminus Cave, reached the bottom chamber and encountered Zygarde. Because this was going to be my last act in X or Y, I didn't mind just chucking the Master Ball at it, which had also become a tradition in these videos. So now we only have the mythical Pokemon left. Diancie, Hoopa and Volcanion continued the trend of being mythicals that are not obtainable in any game at all, ever. That could change in the future obviously, but for now they have only ever been given away directly at events, rather than actually being available to be captured. Which was a shame, as I'm not a big fan of having to just add them to the games, but I had to do what I had to do. Well, I thought that at first anyway, but two of them can be obtained in my favourite exercise regime, Pokemon Go. At first I was just going to do this for Hoopa, but then it turned out that I had a timed event called Glitz and Glam, and I must have picked up by accident years ago, which led to this cutscene that I was not at all expecting. Then I followed the task Misunderstood Mischief and also caught Hoopa. I then transferred Diancie to home, followed by Hoopa, and then I only had one more to go. And so I decided to give Omega Ruby one last send-off before I ditched it forever, and added an official Volcanion event into the game, completing this segment of the challenge, still without breaking the chain. As always, thank you very much for watching. This was a long time coming thanks to that Noivern problem, but it feels good to be free of that. The next video, or perhaps videos, will again be on games other than Pokemon, so I hope you will look forward to that. If you're still waiting for part 7 to come out, I would highly suggest you check out my video in which I got all the achievements in Dark Souls from memory as quickly as possible, which I will link in the description below. And if you want to see even more in the future, and I can assure you there will be more, I would therefore love it if you subscribed. It would certainly make my day a lot brighter. Anyway, that's all I've got for now, so I shall see you all in the next one. I actually don't have any cool post-credits content to add in, so here you go. Bye bye.